So, I'm just gonna ask you a couple of questions. We're gonna start with, like the easy ones, just to get to know each other. What is your name?
Dave Liberto,
Okay.
and live here in Hamilton. All my life went to school here. Went off to the University of Dayton. Worked for Whitehall for quite a few years, about 10 years. And then what took place with my mother-in-law, my father-in-law passed away. And that's when I went into business with her to keep the shop going and all.
Did your wife work there too?
No, she was a school teacher.
Oh, okay.
So basically he's a bacteriologist. His degree's in bacteriology.
Really?
Yeah, and he was working
That's
for Whitehall
interesting.
Labs as a scientist. But then when his
Yeah, I
father-in-law
worked in there.
died,
Oh,
then he came over here
assist with the
to
business.
assist for the business and stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what did you do here?
Well, I supervised the shipping, receiving, basically quality control also as I learned the different steps coming in. And basically, you name it, I did it. On Saturdays, we cleaned the whole shop, what we call blow down all the motors, get all the dust out of the motors, because when you're sewing and you're cutting materials and stuff, you get a lot of dust. And it gets into your motors and all that, and every Saturday morning, every motor got blown out, so you would have a fire or a breakdown as such, more so fires. You know, although we had a complete sprinkler system in the building, but you still don't want a fire.
Right, preventative.
So it was that. And every Saturday they would blow down, what we call blow down the motors.
What year did you start working here?
I started working here in 1965.
Do you know anything, like, from before, when your mother and father-in-law worked here, how long they worked here?
They started in
58.
In 58.
Okay.
58.
She started out, my grandmother she started in 58, but she only leased the first floor. And she built the business enough that she could buy the whole building. So each year she just kept getting bigger and bigger. So she started out in 58, and it was coats. All they made here were coats. That was the only thing that was made.
What was
Sportwear.
What was the building called at that time?
Well, at that time, the business was still called National Garment
Okay.
Yeah.
and all, but each floor, there was another tenant, and then they moved out, and she bought them out, and then she went to the second floor, then eventually the third floor, and bought the complete building. It was only within a couple of years.
Yeah, by the 1961, she had the whole building.
She made sportwear. Car coats were big at that time, outerwear. And then, when it got into the summer or so-called spring season, which is opposite, in other words, in the winter you were making your spring season, in the summer or spring and summer you were making your winter garments as such. We made blazers, ladies and girls blazers as such. Now on car coats we made 1,000, anywhere from a 900 to basically 1,000 a day. Now on blazers we made 1,000 a day, and every 2 weeks you picked up an extra 1,000, because you would get 1,200 for the day, 1,100, 1,200, 1,300, and blazers.
You almost have to think of the workflow, because my grandma was more the office person. She was, doing the business end and the accounting end and that type of thing. So Dad was more the floor person, workflow, that type of thing, quality control, workflow, machines, all that type of stuff. So basically that's really was like their relationship. So he was more out on the floor, and she was more the office. She was the office, the accounting, the bookwork, the, orders, all that kind of stuff.
And we had like a supervisor on the foreman on the floor also, and he just went around checking the quality of, showed the ladies and fellas what needed to be done, or how to sew it, how the garment be put together, because every style is different, So now upstairs on the third floor, once we took over the whole 3 floors, the third floor up top was the cutting room. We called that the cutting room. Everything was cut. We would lay out the garments, lay out the cloth, and then we put the patterns over the top, and it'd be cut. We had 5, 6, I think it was 7 total.
But you have to understand that what it would be these really, really long tables. So the fabric might be this high, and then it was almost like a jigsaw cut out, like a jigsaw saw would cut out that pattern, so that's how they would do. And then all those pieces come together for the coat.
After they're cut out, you don't drop one of those bundles or what have you, because so you wouldn't have shading in your coat, because you want that coat, each piece, this sleeve's got to match this collar's got to match the back and your side front panels, okay? That would be brought over, still up on the 3rd floor, on the side, on that side of the building, there was an opening there that, what we called our pin ticket room. They would go in there, and there was 3 pin ticketers, what we call, would take each ply of garments, whether it be 80 high, 60 high, or whatever, depending on how the patterns went and how thick the coats were going to be or whatever. They would put a ticket on every piece of that jacket or garment that's going to be put together. And that'd be tied up. In other words, this cuff would have a pin ticket on it. This sleeve's got a pin ticket on it.
Mm-hmm.
This collar, the under collar's got a pin ticket on it. Starting from the, say, the top ply, what we call a ply, the top row of material, be 1, okay, 1A here, there better be 1A here, better be 1A under the collar, okay, 1A on the back, so when it goes downstairs and it gets on the say the collar maker's bench, she picked up just that 1A and the under collar of 1A and sewed them together. And then she kept them in a bundle. And as it kept going through the factory, the jacket kept being put together. And then you had the pocket makers that made just the pockets. They would make the pocket, but then a couple aisles down would be the pocket setter, who would set it on the front of this coat or jacket. And that one better be with the front also. And so if not, you would have a shaded coat, then it's rejected.
A shaded coat, so you're saying shaded?
Right, so like it would
Shaded, yes.
be, because fabrics aren't the same, so maybe this would be a little bit
You
darker
think
than this, so you'd have to
everything's
break.
like everything's navy here, and you figure you pick up 2 pieces of navy and put them together, it would be like night and day.
Huh.
You would spot that a mile away.
Right, so that
that
coat
they
would be
shade off.
rejected. So think about going through this whole entire factory, that every one, so that's why it's all, so all those pieces have to come together by the time it was ready to ship.
And how long from start to finish for one coat does it take? Or did it take?
Well, you could knock that right out. I guess if you had to do it that way, being longer as such, I was saying a couple hours you would have one jacket made. What would take place is the pocket makers would just keep making the pockets. And like I said, they would be these bundles where it would be ticketed, and they would break the bundles down. We would cut them maybe 80 high, but there may be 4 bundles of 20 apiece. That'll be like 1A, then it'll be like 1B, 1C, 1D. And when it kept going down the floor, when that 1A, when the bundle fella or the floor boy would go pick up a bundle of pockets, he would get a bundle of 1A pockets and go get a bundle of 1A fronts and bring them over to Mary, so to speak, that would be her name, to set the pockets in. Put them on. And then she made sure that he put them on her bench right, that it wasn't flipped over, that she put the 1 down with the 20, because that would be what we call a shaded deal. And they'd all have to be ripped apart
And redone.
and redone.
Right.
Wow.
So it's hard to see, because the coat was never made start to finish.
Yeah.
It's basically was always this workload,
Yeah.
so it's as it goes through the factory. So one style maybe had to be shipped out for Wednesday. They maybe got it like the Friday before, but that all has to be shipped by Wednesday. So you had to do that lot
Yeah,
of
right.
coats
Yeah.
within that amount of time.
But in one day, going through the factory, as I said, we did 1,000 coats.
Right. I
You
think the
have
biggest day you ever had was like 1,100, 1,200,
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
with the blazers and
Yeah.
stuff. So,
So, but they had to be cut. You couldn't cut it that same day, 1,000 coats. The cutting room was maybe a week ahead of the sewing room.
Right, I see what you're saying.
Okay, and the same thing with the pen ticket people. They were a good week ahead of the sewing room. Then the sewing room would get it and then push it through.
So if you kind of picture it, so starting from the top floor, so the fabric gets cut, it gets pin ticketed, it gets dropped to the second floor. Then these pieces come together that are being sewn, the backs, the collars, works its way all through what they call the second floor of sewing. Then it got dropped down to the third floor, the bottom
Or
level.
the first floor or the bottom floor.
Right,
Okay, depending on how you wanted to name them.
Right.
That would be our bottom floor, second floor, third floor.
and there then was buttons,
Yeah.
well, press, well,
Yeah, when they got to the back of the second floor, the last thing was done was the stitching on the coat, okay? You know, on the lapels, if there was stitching on your pockets,
something like
did you
this.
have any stitching on?
No, well, maybe like
Well, yeah,
pieces
yeah,
like this.
This
see?
here would be done, any of the top stitching on your jacket would be finished on the top.
Right.
Then we would drop it down to the first floor. There, they would take that jacket and what we call mark it for buttonholes, if it had buttons.
Like this has a button.
Right, okay, we would mark that, there would be patterns depending on the size of the coat. You know, size 8, size 10, size 12, 14, 16. And we went from 8, mainly those blazers, anywhere from 8.
I think 6, you did some.
Yeah,
like
we did
six,
some 6.
Like 6 to
Yeah, 6 to 16.
There was no plus sizes back
Yeah,
in those
yeah,
days per
yeah.
se.
Well,
right?
well, we didn't make it, there was
Right.
plus sizes, but
Right.
they went to other factories or what
Right.
have you. We just did the average size of the bulk of the
Population.
So this jacket would come down and then she would put the pattern and she would mark it with like a wax crayon.
And then we had, and they were pretty good at it, we had what we called 2 buttonhole makers. It went to that buttonhole maker first, and it was marked for her, and she put it under her machine and knocked 1 button, 2 buttons, depending on what the style was, 1 button or maybe 2 buttons, 3 buttons, depending on what was the coat. After that there, another girl would take them off these buttonhole makers, flip them over and mark for the buttons, where the buttons had to go. Then it went to 2 girls sewing buttons, and they would take that coat and sew the button on. Then from after the button was sewn on, it went to 2 to 3 girls, depending on the style and you know how you got to get it going, to clean what we call clean the coat. All those pin tickets had to be squeezed and pulled out because they were put on like with a staple. And you had to squeeze it so you wouldn't make holes in that fabric. And they would take that, and any loose string that was left on the garment from when they stitched and they tacked it down and all, or even from when they had the buttonhole, there's always a little string there and all. And these girls would clean it, knit it up, push it, pile them there in the back, and then the pressers would grab it. Then you had 2 pressers doing just the linings in the coats, just press linings. Then you had the body pressers that would press the body of it, the collar and the body, and then it went to the sleeve pressers. They were at the end. The sleeve pressers then would press the sleeves on it, put them on a hanger, and then they'd be there. They'd be taken from them pressers, put on racks, and brought down to what we call the examiners. And there was anywhere from 4 to 5 girls examining those coats. And there again, now they would look for, make sure that there was no shading on the coat, that there was no gathering with the stitching and what have you, that everything lay smooth. If not, they would mark it, send it back upstairs. Now, when it got back upstairs, they would say it's the sleeve. The setting, too much gathering in the back, they didn't spread it evenly around, and they would say it's, and they would leave a pin ticket. There was always the last pin ticket left on each sleeve, even when they got pressed as such, because the way it was set up that when it went back upstairs or anything was wrong with that coat, they would say bundle A, and there'd be a lot number there. Each one had a lot number, and they would say the lot 328, bundle 1. Now there's 4 or 5 girls setting sleeves. They look in their book. I did bundle 1.
Whoops.
Fix it.
You got to fix that. You got to
Right.
rip that out and
Right.
reset that
sleeve.
that sleeve.
What a process.
Oh,
My
yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, everything matched up, right to the T. You know just who did anything on that jacket, whether they set the lining in, whether they set the pocket, whether they set the collar, or whatever. And you trace it right back. Then it go back down, and then the girls would grab those coats again, check them out again. And if everything was fine, they pull the